Morning.
Morning.
Lent. The 40 days before, it depends on how you count, either before Holy Week or before Good Friday. But Lent is a time that we are invited to reflect and contemplate what exactly does our faith mean to us? What does it mean when we say we are followers of Christ? How does that shape our lives and our living? And we use the 40 days as the same 40 days that Jesus fasted in the desert as preparations for his ministry. I've said before, the Lent came about as preparation for those who were being baptized, but then became the idea that we should all take time to reflect and really think about what it means. And the first Sunday of Lent is always the temptation story. And every year it starts off with an invitation for us to examine what is it that pulls us from the path that calls us to God. What are the things in our lives that tempt us to not be who God has called us to be? And we forget sometimes, we like to think of temptation in fairly simple terms. You know, there's this, like the flashing good and the flashing evil, and of course we're going to choose the good. Or we try to make it as simple as possible, and especially when we look at other people's lives, we go, why would they choose that? Like, they should know better. And then we miss our own failings. Because the whole point of temptation is it's tempting. That's its very nature. It calls us, and it invites us on this other path with the promise that this other path is not as bad as we think it is, that there are advantages to take it. For Jesus, the three temptations are ways for him to be able to gain control over the people. The bread, it's often used as, because he was hungry and to take care of his needs, but also that if he feeds the world will follow him. If he can turn the very stones into bread, then the desert becomes a place of bounty, and imagine the people that would follow him. And the temple, he's up on top, he throws himself off, the angels catch him. The people have no choice but to believe. Before, CGI and all of those things, they would believe. Nowadays, we'd probably say, it was an illusion or a trick. But their faith wouldn't be needed because they would already see and know. And in a sense, it would take away the journey for the people, and Jesus would just be able to lead them without any work. And the last one is just pure power. And I said this at Fawcett's, but imagine if you had control of the world right now. What would you do? If you could command all the nations, would that be a bad thing? Think of the wars that you could stop. Think about the laws you could put in place so that people were just and that people had to follow. You would be able to do a lot of good, and you would save people's lives. So what is that worth? What is it worth to bring order to this chaotic world of ours? And that, in a sense, is what Jesus is tempted with. To have the power to make the people be who God has called them to be. And all he has to do is worship the devil. All of these temptations, and often the ones that get us, can be kind of summed up in a short little, the ends justify the means. That what the end result is worth what we have to do to get there. And that sort of thought process has dictated a world where we are allowed to do things that are bad and wrong because we believe that the outcome will be worth it. And every time we do that, every time we say, well, this isn't preferable, but look at what happens in the end, what we're saying is, I don't trust that God is going to go about this long, hard way to bring about the end I want. I will trust in myself to do this thing that I shouldn't do because that will be the end that God wants. And so we say, you know what, God, you have a great plan, but here, let me make it better. I know, God, you say, don't eat of this fruit, but here, we're going to eat of this fruit because it's going to be better in the long run. We do this all the time. It's at the root, in the sense of our temptation, is not trusting God, of saying that our way is better, that what we need to do is more important than what God has called us to do. But there's also the place of where our temptation comes from, and that's often from not only our lack of trust in God, but our own sense of insecurity, our own sense of fear, and our own sense of doubt. It's sometimes those very things that feed our temptation. When we're scared, we act out in a way that we wouldn't otherwise, but we're worried. Or when we're angry, we lash out in ways that we wouldn't otherwise, but we're mad. And those are all the times where we put our own personal emotions and feelings before what God has called us to do. And sometimes the temptation, it's not even just, it doesn't necessarily look bad at the time, but it moves us along that path, which is what the tempter tries to do to Jesus. The path we have been called to walk is hard. It's not that it isn't an amazing, life-giving, wonderful path, but it's hard. It's hard to be aware and vigilant of why we do the things that we do. It's hard to be kind and patient when we are upset and tired. It's hard to be forgiving when we are mad and hurt. All of these things take effort. And part of what we need to be able to do is discover, okay, where is my anger coming from? Where is my impatience? What is it that is tempting me to do these things I know I shouldn't do? I think it was Wednesday. Wednesday? Did we get snow on Wednesday? Tuesday night? Anyways, one of the days, it was Wednesday, because I left early, because I was staying for the Good Friday service. So I get onto the highway.
Ash Wednesday.
What? Ash Wednesday, yeah. So I get onto the highway, and there's a semi going without a trailer, and he's in this lane. It's where the number 1 blends in with the number 2. And I'm looking like, okay, that semi's going to go too slow for me. But the passing lane is covered. And so when I'm driving the Jetta's seen better days. It's kind of a bit of a clunker, but we have winter tires on, and yeah, there's a little bit of ice and snow on the passing lane, but so I shift down, I start to accelerate, and I can feel the car going, and I'm like, nah, it's okay, I'll just kind of go past him this way. And then there's a voice inside my head saying, but why? And I'm like, shh, I'm driving. And it goes, no, but why do you feel the need to drive past? You're going to stress him out because you're already stressed. And then once you pass him, you're going to feel the need to pass everyone else. And why? And the voice inside my head says, it's because I need to get to work early. And again, the voice says, why? I'm like, I'm annoyed at this point because I'm trying to pay attention as I'm starting to swerve around. And it says, so you can get there 5 minutes early. So what? You can walk into the duty desk and the officers there go, oh, look at that. Gord's, it's bad weather and Gord's showing up on time. Oh, look at that. I can get all the stuff done that I need to get done. And I can have extra time in case I need it. And the voice inside my head says, you're doing this because you think you need to, when if you get to work 5 minutes later, it's going to be okay. You're going to pass these people simply because of your own desire. Don't make this about somebody else. This is all about you. And I pulled him behind the semi. And instantly my windshield got whipped with all the snow and the slush coming from it. And I drove the whole way more or less blind. I ran out of windshield washer fluid. But I didn't drive like a jerk. I didn't go whipping past people. I didn't drive in times of where my heart rate had to go up because I wasn't sure if I was going to stay on the road. And when I got to work later, I realized that nothing had changed remarkably in the world. It's not like the guard said, wow, Gord, we thought you'd be here 5 minutes earlier, because most of the time they're oblivious to me. And it's not like I got to the chapel and the guys weren't going to give me a hard time anyways, because they always do. So why did I feel that need? But then when I was thinking about why do I feel the need when I am impatient at other times? What is that growing sense of me having to be places on time, and so then I make bad choices to be able to justify being there on time. I rush, I get impatient, I sit there and drum on the steering wheel if a certain someone whose name I shall not mention isn't out in the car in the fast time that I expect, and then I'm kind of grumpy for the first 4 minutes of the drive because we didn't leave on my time. And I justify all this because I want to be there when I think I need to be there. As opposed to, I need to be the best person I can be now, in this moment. Not needing to be there so I can be the best person in the 5 extra minutes that I have, but I need to be able to be the best person on the whole drive, the whole way, the whole walking, my whole interactions with people. So one of the things I am striving to do is to look at the source of my impatience, look at that sense of that need to be somewhere on time, and say, yeah, it's not bad. I like to be on time. I like to be someone that people can rely on. But it's not justification for me to not be the kind, compassionate person that I need to be every time, every second, every mile on the road or kilometer. We sometimes will get upset with someone and we're saying because they're not doing things that they should do. But in the end, we're getting upset with them because we have chosen to think that this is how it has to be done and they're not doing what we want them to do. We'll be scared because we don't trust what other people will do. And we think that somehow they're going to look at us or judge us or dismiss us. And so we're scared, not realizing that what they do is up to them. Who we are is what we are in control of and what we're supposed to take responsibility for. So we shouldn't let our fear or our anger or our impatience or 101 other things change who we are in this moment. And that's hard. It's hard to be that vigilant. But that's what we're called to do. And that's what we have 40 days now to look at and to say, who do I want to be? And, even after turning 60, I still, you'd think at this point I'd have it all figured out, and not even close. And there's still so much to work on. There's so much to do. And so I invite Lent. I invite the 40 days for me to sit and to look at the reasons why I am doing the things I should not be doing. Why I get impatient, why I am rushing, why I don't have the compassion and mercy or forgiveness that I should. Brandon was a good guy. If you knew Brandon, he was kind and polite and always courteous. He always was very, very much the social norm. He would follow exactly what you would expect of him. But Brandon also had control issues. He was always telling people what they needed to do. He was always that person that when you would do something, you say, it should actually go that way. He was the person who always had that extra advice when you didn't want it. That person who had that extra insight he felt that the other person was lacking even when you weren't lacking it. Brandon always was telling people how they should live their lives. As a minor manager in a business, this was not necessarily bad in that he would get all the raw recruits and he would micromanage them to the point where they couldn't stand him, but he would help them to learn those original ropes. But as soon as they were able to do anything on their own, they got moved out of his department. And at one point, when he went to his on his review process with his manager, he kind of said, I'd like to maybe move up at some point. And his manager looked, smiled, and says, yeah, that's not going to happen. He says, you micromanage, which is great for our raw recruits, but you never build a team. You're always telling them what they need to do and never giving them the chance to do what they need to do. And he says, you're not really good with your peer managers because you're always telling them they don't like you. He says, look, you're doing a great job where you are at a low management. You teach the raw recruits, and that's fantastic. But everything beyond that, it's not where your gifts lie. Your gifts lie in being a micromanager. And Brandon was upset. But he also recognized the truth of it. And if he was honest, everyone thought he was a know-it-all. Everyone thought that he walked around thinking he was better than everyone else. But the reality is that Brandon was scared. He was scared that people wouldn't need him. He was scared that people didn't respect or recognize him. And so the reason why he was doing all these things was to let people know that he had value. Because deep down, Brandon didn't think he had value. And so he overstated things all the time about himself. He would talk about all the great things he did because he was trying to convince himself and create the image that others would look at him and say, oh, that Brandon, he's a great guy. And in doing all those things, everyone looked at Brandon and said, he's not a great guy, and he knew that. But he was scared that if he didn't point out what he was doing, if he didn't point out that he had the knowledge and the ability, that people would not see who he was. He did not trust that other people would recognize his value because he did not recognize his own value. And this came through particularly in relationships. At first, Brandon would be great in a relationship. He would be the guy who would do all those extra little things, like give flowers, remember all the dates, be at there 5 minutes early, like why he do all the things you would expect. But then after a while, people in a relationship with him would realize that now Brandon is actually kind of controlling. They would say, well, he says, oh, this is where we're going to go, and this is what we're going to have, and I'll pick you up at this time, and I'll drop you off here. They say, well, maybe we should just kind of wing it. And Brandon would say, that's great. Here's our plan for winging it. And he would write it down in different time slots. He was terrified that if they actually got to know him, they wouldn't want to be with him. Because he didn't want to be with himself. And so all of his relationships he would micromanage to death. And then he met Beth. And Beth was just completely off the charts quirky. She was funny, she was bizarre, she was everything that he wasn't. And he felt it so inviting to just be that part. And at first, again, the first little while it went great. And he worked really hard to let go, but in the end he couldn't. And he kept telling Beth, this is what you need to do, this is what we need to do, this is all. And and Beth, who was quirky at first, kind of enjoyed the fact that he was so rigid that she could just go complete. But then she came to the point where she said to him, look, you're going to have to trust me. If we have a relationship, you have to decide if you want a relationship between two people or if you just want someone that you get to tell what to do all the time. Because if that's what you're looking for, trust me, I'm not that person. So what will we have? And Brandon's like, I want a relationship. She goes, really? He goes, yes. And she says, prove it. And so Brandon was working so hard at not. And he would write himself constant notes. Don't say this. Don't plan that. And he was living in utter fear the whole time because he thought it was just a matter of time until Beth would go, why am I spending time with you? And then came the big test. Beth told him that she was going off for a weekend with high school friends. They do this every 5 years. They rent a cabin and they go off and And Beth was looking forward to this. She was talking about her friends that she only sees like once every 5 years. It's going to be great. And Brandon's sitting there going, oh yeah, that sounds like fantastic. She's leaving me. She's meeting someone else. She doesn't care about me anymore. This is how she's letting me down. All the while he's smiling and nodding. And Beth stops and looks at him and goes, I'm going to need you to trust me. He goes, yeah. She goes, no, I'm going to need you to trust me. I don't want you to text me. I don't want you to call me, because I'm just going off for a weekend. And the whole point of this weekend is that we just kind of reminisce about high school and we forget everything else. So don't call me. He goes, no, of course not. She goes, this is important, Brandon. I need to know that you will let me be my own person. And Brendan goes, I only want you as you are. I don't want to control you. She goes, great. And she left. And after about, the cabin was like 3 hours away. And after about, he waited a long time. It was a full 15 minutes. And he started to go like, no, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. He went to watch a movie because the movie would keep him trapped. And he left the movie halfway through because he wasn't even watching. He couldn't even remember what the movie was. And he thought, I'm not going to text her, I'm not going to call her, I'm just going to drive past the cabin just to see that she's there with her friends, and then I can rest. Like, it's not a bad thing because I'm worried about her. I don't want something to happen to her. I'm just going to watch, just peek through the window. It sounds creepy, but it's just, I just want to be. And so he got into his car and he started to drive. And he drove 3 hours. And there was a gas station right before the drive to the cabins. And he stopped. And he thought, who do I want to be? And he goes, I want to have a relationship, but that means I have to be willing to trust. I have to be willing to let her see something in me that I can't even see myself. And if I drive down that road, our relationship is over. And I'm thinking that I want to end the relationship just because I am so scared to be in this relationship. And he picked up his phone. He thought, I'm just going to text her. And then he had his phone in his hand and he threw it down on the ground in this by the passenger seat, grabbed his handlebar, shook, yelled, got in the car, and drove home. And that night, he slept for the first time the whole night through. Because on the drive home, he came to the decision that I will trust Beth. And if that works out, great. And if it doesn't, it's better to go this way than for me to be so controlling. And even at that point in his life, when everyone else had thought he could not change, Brandon changed. He gave that up. On Monday, Beth called and said, you want to go out for lunch or for supper? He said, yes. I'd love to hear how your weekend went. They got there and she said, so how was your weekend? And he looked at her and he said, well, Friday was terrible because I wanted to see you and I was scared and I didn't trust you and I drove all the way to the gas station before, but then I turned around and went back. She smiled ear to ear. She goes, yeah, I saw you. And we were buying chips and I saw you and I looked at my friends and I said, there's my former boyfriend. But then you turned and went back the other way and I said, no, he's still my boyfriend. And we form life patterns sometimes based off of our own insecurities, our own fear, our own anger, and we feel trapped by them. And we start to believe the story that the end justifies the means, that even though this isn't necessarily who we want to be, it's better in the long run for us to do this. And it allows us not to have to trust God. Because if we are kind, if we are patient, if we are understanding, if we are forgiving, then we give up some of the control in our life to God. So this Sunday, the first Sunday of Lent, I have stones. They're the big stones. Those are Linda's. Please don't take the big stones. But the smaller stones, every Sunday for Lent, I'm going to invite you to grab one stone. And that stone is a physical reminder of what we should be working on this week. I did this on Thursday, and so I have it by my computer, my first little stone. I'm going to take one here and have it at home, so I get 2 stones. But the stone is there, and I look at it and I remember, right, what is my motivation? What is tempting me to not walk on the path that God has called me to be? What is tempting me to be less than who God has invited me to be? And I invite us then to work these next 40 days on these different things. I could say, 1 week temptation, 1 week, but the reality is, I invite you to work all 40 days. Some of the days some of the things we'll have to work on less days, thankfully. The last one, it's only a week, but maybe it's best that we start with temptation, because that probably takes the most work. For us to look and to think, why do I do the things that I know I should not do? So during the hymn that Mark is leading, sorry for any disruption, but I invite you to come and to grab a stone, and to have that stone be your reminder to think and to contemplate, what is it that pulls me from the path of God?